Welcome to Evilive, the live media commentary show that answers the question, how many Targaryens and dragons will be in this series? Subscribe if you're new to the channel, because today we're reviewing HBO's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1, Episode 1, The Hedge Knight. Now, I've been excited for this as soon as I found out that it was a thing. I've never actually read the 3 novellas that this series is based on, but they are supposed to be up to 3 different seasons for this series, and then that's it, unless they decide to add more. I know George R.R. Martin has shared the idea that he wants to continue writing these, even though he still hasn't finished his A Song of Ice and Fire series as of yet. But who knows what he's going to do? His life is his own. He gets to do what he wants. All right, so this series was created by Ira Parker and George R.R. Martin. It's based off of The Tales of Dunk and Egg by George R.R. Martin, and is composed by Dan Romer. The music is pretty good. I mean, it's very, of course, it connects with themes of Game of Thrones, and then subverts your expectations in wonderfully delightful ways, which we'll get into here in a second. It, of course, premiered yesterday, January 18th on HBO, and it's going to consist of 6 episodes in this first season. As far as I know, they're all going to be under an hour, so it's just not very long. I want to live in this world longer, and I wish they would put the series out more often, because I'm still anxious to pick up with House of the Dragon Season 3. Desperately so. And there's a new series that's going to be coming back that was going to be continuing Jon Snow, his journey, but instead it's now going to be following, what was her name? Arya Stark's journey across Westeros and other continents and stuff. So that should be interesting if it ever comes to reality. But we do have this, and so let's talk about that. So in November 2025, ahead of the first season premiere, the series was renewed for a second season, which is expected to be released in 2027. So we do know there are 2 seasons at least, but it's rumored that there could be up to 3. This was such a weird and wonderful introduction to this world, because we're so used to the very overt, serious Game of Thrones and then House of the Dragons series set in this universe. This is all of that, but not on the 10,000 foot level. This is on the ground level, where you're humiliated and where things are funny and you get laughed at and you tell jokes and you hear the jokes and you enjoy them, and you just sort of you celebrate the fragility of life and the ridiculousness of it all. That's the vibe I'm getting from this first episode, and I'm here for it. It is different. It takes a much more comedic bent. For example, we start with Duncan, or Dunk, who is a young squire to Sir Arlen of Pennytree, and he's burying Pennytree in this downpouring of rain. And the first thing he says is, "I don't have the words. I don't know what to say." So he's clearly not an educated man, Dunk. And as the story is unfolding, we're shown that his Sir Arlen, actually abused him quite a bit. But Dunk is this massively tall, human who's strong and everything. And as soon as that's over, we cut right to him shitting behind a tree. And it shows him shitting with poop flying out of his butt. Like, it reminded me of the deer in Castle Crashers or 8 Crazy Nights, when they would laugh and just like shit would fly out of their butts. That is the vibe that I got out of this. It was just like slapsticky and ridiculous, and just like, okay, well, this is what this is going to be like. It's going to subvert all your expectations about being a serious, heavy-handed Game of Thrones, and it's actually going to be tongue-in-cheek, or shit out of cheeks as necessary. Just weird stuff. All right. So this episode is titled The Hedge Knight. It was directed by Owen Harris. It was written by Ira Parker, and it was originally released yesterday, January 18th. So we start with him defecating outdoors and then pontificating about what he's going to do with his life. He has his master's sword, and so he's like, you know what? I'm going to go to an inn. There's a, not an inn, but there's a tournament happening in the town of Ashford that he is going to then travel to. On the way there, he stops at an inn and he meets this little bald child who asks to be his squire. And he's like, no. And the little kid is super full of sass, and it's hilarious. And Dunk is constantly threatening to hit him, but he never does. He was beat as a kid, and he doesn't want to repeat that. You can just tell. And he believes in honor and justice, and he tries to uphold that to the best of his ability, even though he's pretty ignorant of the greater world at large, and he's clearly never done anything on his own before. And so this is very much a coming of age tale for Dunk, primarily, and coming into his own, as it were, as an adult, as a knight, etc. So ultimately, he tells the little bald kid to bugger off and leave him alone. And then he travels to Ashford. He goes to meet the steward to sign up for the tourney, but only knights can join the tourney. Now, this is where Dunk claims that his sir knighted him before he died. But because there's no one to vouch for it, he has to find someone who can vouch for his sir, who is now dead, for being a knight. If he can find someone to vouch for his sir, then they will let him be in the tournament as a knight. But barring that, anyone could come up and claim to be a knight, and there's no way to prove it otherwise, right? And so they need some sort of proof. So he heads off to, he learns that Sir Manfred Dondarrion, whom his Sir Arlen served with, is in fact also in Ashford. And so he goes to talk to them. And it turns out this dude just loves prostitutes. He has 2 prostitutes outside of his tent, and they're like, he's sleeping, and they just sort of mock him and make fun of him. And there's this really great moment where he's like, you don't have to mock me, just because I'm a hedge knight. I'm trying the best I can. And then they sort of endear themselves. He endears himself to them, and they start being a little more open and honest with him and stuff. But he can't talk to Sir Manfred. He has to come back that night. On his way for the rest of the day, he's like witnesses a knight, Sir Stephen Fossaway, beating the shit out of his squire Raymond Fossaway, and then obviously asks Dunk if he wants to go in and sword fight with him, and Dunk's like, no, I've got other things I got to do, and so he wanders off. But Raymond catches up with Dunk later on and has him go with him to Sir Lionel Baratheon's tent. Now look, I'm a Baratheon fan since the first Game of Thrones. I thought that Baratheon was awesome. His jovial nature, but there's a genuine murderous undertone to the character, and a gravitas and weight to the character, physically and, of course, just in presence. And I really liked the character. And so to meet another Baratheon, again, this is set about 90 to 100 years before Game of Thrones. So the Targaryens are still out there. They're still running things. Their dragons, I think, are much smaller now, but they're still in charge of Westeros. And so the Baratheons, they haven't, it's going to be another 70, 80 years before they usurp the Targaryens. So this version of Baratheon is awesome. I absolutely love this character. He is much more of a gypsy in tone, I guess you could say, certainly in appearance, but his vibe is very gypsy. And he starts by, presenting this very powerful, commanding demeanor, which someone of his authority has inherently. But Dunk is so innocent and sort of ignorant to the way that you're supposed to communicate and behave around your supposed betters that Baratheon's sort of taken in by his innocence and his sort of naivete. And they become, sort of friends for the night. Drinking buddies is a better term. And just dancing and having a ball. And it's like one of the greatest scenes, just seeing these 2 guys dance together, having the best of times. And just both of them are just sort of coming into their own with each other. And we're learning about both characters at the same time as they're learning about each other. And it's a very cool sequence to witness. Ultimately, Dunk tells Baratheon, I don't have any money. I need someone to vouch for me. And if I lose this first tournament, if I'm even let in, they're going to take my horse as payment, and I can't buy my horse back because you ransom back the armor and weapons and horse from the knights that you beat, or you keep them. And so, he's like, well, what am I supposed to do? And Baratheon's like, look, I'm drunk as hell right now. I don't know what you're going to do. Anyway, good luck. And that's the end of the scene. So it's like early night. Dunk goes off to go find Manfred, who is sleeping during the day, so he must be up at night. He finds him with the two whores, and he's like, hey, my sir served with your father. Can you vouch for me so I can enter this tournament? He's like, I don't know you. I don't know your father. He's like, there's a lot of men that served with them, and a lot of them were killed and murdered during those raids. I'm not going to bother myself with everyone who claims to know someone or anything. So, totally deflated, Dunk has no one to vouch for him being a knight. He can't enter the tournament, and he goes back to where he left two of his three horses. And it turns out that that little egg-headed kid who wanted to be a squire is there with fresh caught fish that are roasting, and the camp is all washed and the horse is groomed and everything. And he just entreats Dunk, I want to be your squire. Let me be your squire. And Dunk says, I'm Sir Duncan the Tall. Yes, I'm definitely a knight, and I'm definitely needing a squire. And then he just sort of lays out the rules for Egg, and Egg agrees to them all. And they sleep out under the night watching the stars, and this meteor or comet flies by, and Egg is like, for people out here looking at the night sky, if you see one of those comets or meteors, it means you have good luck. And then Dunk is just like, well, does that mean that since we're the only ones out here, do we get all that good luck? Because he's deflated. He needs anything to sort of keep him going right at this point. And that was the episode. It was just a really great introduction to Sir Duncan the Tall and his trouble of not really having anything in life right now. And so he figures he might as well go enter a tourney and get a little bit of fame that way and uphold the ways of a knight that he was taught knights should be, even though the person who taught him how to be a knight was not a very good knight himself. And then meeting this squire who he was once a squire himself. And so he knows what it's like to be on the end of things, and he is a good person. He's a good human being, and so he's nice to this kid. Now, here's the reality. I have not read these stories, but Egg, with this kid with shaved head, I think this is a Targaryen kid. I think he is named Aegon, but he goes by Egg because of his bald head. And I think the reason why he can't be squired to any other knight and why he's out on his own is because he's ostracized in his home because he doesn't have those long white flocks, glowing, flowing long hair of the rest of the Targaryens. And so he's a bit of an outcast. And so he wants to go make a name for himself. And so he's sort of, again, I am stretching here, but this makes sense in my headcanon so far. And if I'm totally wrong and off, then I'll admit it next time when we find out the truth. But I think that that's the case with Egg. He's Aegon the Conqueror. He's a descendant. He was named Aegon. Then when he was, grown up, his hair never came in. He was just bald. And so they just shortened it to calling him Egg. And then he left trying to find a knight to squire under to become a knight himself, to prove to his family that he is someone of significance and substance. And ultimately, him and Duncan are going to end up being really great friends. And I can't wait to find out if this rumor is actually true. That I'm posing. All right. So my favorite parts of this first episode, first of all, it was too short. I want it to be longer. I want to live in this world longer. I love it so much. My favorite part is the tonal shift. This is so much more tongue-in-cheek and fun to watch than the serious, dramatic, and political Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon series. And while I love those, I'm really enjoying this so far. I'm really enjoying the tongue-in-cheek. Watching the dude shit, I didn't need. I think it's weird. But it is a statement saying, don't expect this to be like the other ones. And so we had to have something off-wall happen, and that was it. My least favorite part of this, I think, is that it's too short and it didn't come out with 2 episodes. So I just want to live here more. I really enjoyed this first episode. I don't know. I don't know if he's actually a knight or if he's making it up. We're presented with the type of person that he is, that he wouldn't make that up, but we didn't even see it. So how could we as viewers believe him to be a reliable narrator at this point? And we've never seen him tested or tried in whether or not he's going to be righteous and upstanding and a true knight. And so he could be a bit of a degenerate that we're just not aware of because of his ignorance or his stupidity or whatever, naivete. So because it's not absolutely clear to me at this point, it is a bit of a negative on whether or not he's actually a knight or whether he's just making that shit up so that he has some sort of promise of a future. And I wanted more egg. Once I saw a little bit of egg, I want a little bit more egg. And I cannot wait to unravel the history of these two characters, separate, of course, and then they're traveling together and whether or not Duncan can get into the tournament and what happens next. I'm already bought into this series with this first episode, and I'm very, very impressed with the tone and the approach and everything. So, what do you guys think? Is this what you expected out of a Game of Thrones series? Do you enjoy the sort of off the wall approach, or do you prefer the much more serious, gritty, dark Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon series approach? Let me know in the comments. And then, of course, what did you think of episode 1, The Hedge Knight? Love to hear from you. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I would like to invite you to consider becoming a YouTube member or a patron on Patron if you appreciate these different videos that I put out. And it all just helps me keep going. And of course, subscribe to the channel and click the like button and comment to help other people learn about this channel and its content. And like it or not, evil spelled backwards is live. A little hard cut there. So get out there and be evil.